Have you heard the saying, variety is the spice of life? Well, your garden thinks so too. Today we are going to talk about companion planting with our tomatoes. Now, depending on where you look, you will probably see every single vegetable, flower, and herb plant known to man to be a great companion plant for tomatoes. And if we planted all of the things that were recommended to plant around our tomatoes, we would have no room in the garden for tomatoes. So I'm going to talk to you about how I companion plant in my garden. And I think it's probably a little bit different than others. I know that certain plants repel insects, and certain plants just make, like basil, for example, which is what I'm planting right now, is said to make your tomatoes taste better. But I think that all different plants have properties that help each other out. For the most part, there are some exceptions there, plants that have like allelopathic properties where they keep other plants from growing. But for the most part, like I said, variety is the spice of life. So planting intensively with companion planting and practicing polyculture, where you don't just put one type of plant in an area, is what I think makes a healthy, thriving, beautiful garden. And so that's how I do it. So in between these tomatoes, I like to put just a wide variety of plants. I go in with basil, of course. We already talked about how basil can make your tomatoes taste better, but they also have a really strong smell that keeps those hornworm caterpillars away from your tomatoes. And if you don't harvest them and you let them flower, they have the most beautiful blooms. That is a huge attraction to all of the pollinators. Peppers are what I went in with next. Where did I put my label? Who knows? This is a violet sparkle pepper. And when I'm interplanting peppers with tomatoes, I want to try and choose smaller varieties because we want those peppers to be a companion plant, not completely take over the area for our tomatoes. You have most likely heard of using marigold as a companion. This is a widespread companion in most people's garden. Marigolds have a very, very strong smell, similar to the reason that basils work really excellent in your garden. But they just kind of repel pests away from your tomato plants. They have a flower, so they attract pollinators, and they're just really beautiful. So they add that pop of beauty that I have told you many times is really important to me in my garden. I started these marigold from seed in my basement this year, and I couldn't believe how quick they bloomed. These were a really easy to grow plant. The next thing I like to put into my garden are green beans. Green beans are an excellent companion plant for tomatoes. One, because when it rains and you don't have mulch or anything around your tomato plant, that soil is going to splash up and get on your tomato leaves. And that's a really good way to have disease in your garden. So doing something like planting a few green bean seeds at the base of your plant is going to provide some really leafy green foliage as a ground cover that will help that soil from splashing back onto your plants. Also, they flower, so it's going to bring in pollinators. And I have this area here, so why not use it? I want my garden to be very intensively planted so that I get as much produce from my space as possible. I also love putting bush cucumbers in between my tomato plants for the same reasons as the green beans. They're going to provide a lot of leafy foliage. They're going to have flowers for the pollinators and more food for my family. A new companion plant that I'm trying out in my garden this year is celery. I'm going to put a few different celeries in between. I think this is, I can't remember if it was Tango or Utah. I had both seeds out and was having a hard time deciding between the two. But I'm going to be putting some of these spaced out in between my cucumbers as well. really, I think that they're really going to benefit from the huge amount of water that I give my tomatoes. And we will see if they help the tomatoes out any. I'm not sure. I haven't seen it used as a companion plant before, but Google told me that it would work fine. So we're going to try it out this year. I also started these celery seeds in my basement. And this is the first time I have grown celery before. I grew the pink celery from Baker Creek, but this is my first time growing just a typical variety of celery. And at first they were so slow to germinate. They took a really long time, and then they were very slow growing. So I kind of thought they weren't going to work out, but I now have a whole tray of these beautiful celery plants, and they look really great. All right, so those are the types of things that I am going to be companion planting with this year. Like I said, I have basil, I have small varieties of peppers, I have French marigolds, green beans, cucumbers, and celery. I'm going to finish companion planting the rest of my rows, and then I will see you back here in just a minute. I almost forgot to tell you, radishes are also an excellent companion plant for your tomatoes, especially while your tomatoes are small and have a lot of free space at the bottom. Radishes mature really quickly, like 28 to 35 days, and so they're an excellent plant to plant at the base of your tomatoes. They do repel pests, and you're going to have a really quick maturing crop ready before your tomato plant is even 3 feet high. Now I'm going to go in with this Easter basket radish mix and just sprinkle a few radishes around. I actually don't love the taste of radishes, but they're fun to pick, and my kids really enjoy it. And I have the space right now, so no harm in putting them in. If you have any recipes that make radishes actually taste good, send them my way, because I am not a picky eater. I like most things. I've just really never found a way that I enjoy radishes. They're too spicy for me. I've heard that baking them kind of takes the spice away, and I have tried that, like roasted radishes. I really didn't care for those either. So if you have a way that you think they're just really delicious, send me the recipe. And that goes with anything that I'm putting in my garden. If you're like, oh, I have a really excellent way to fix shishito peppers, send it to me. I absolutely love to cook, and even more so when the ingredients come from my garden. So any recipes that you have that you really love, I would greatly appreciate them. I just remembered that I had some dill that I seeded a few weeks ago, and I'm going to go ahead and interplant it in all of the spaces that I put a cucumber plant, because dill is a great companion plant for tomatoes, but it's also a really great companion plant for cucumbers. So 2 in 1, I will take that. All right, we have that very first row of tomatoes all companion planted, interplanted, intensively planted, whatever word you want to use there. It works, and it works very well. So I'm going to show you what it looks like. There are a lot of plants packed into that little area, and they are going to help each other grow and thrive and give their maximum harvest and allow more food for my family to be able to eat from my garden space. I know when you look at my garden, or I feel anyways, like it looks pretty big. I still run out of room. I'm not sure where I'm even going to put my okra this year, but I know that I have to fit it in somewhere. So planting like this and using your space wisely, packing as much food into one spot as you can is super helpful and super important if you're short on space. I know looking at my garden, you may not think that I am short on space, especially if you're somebody who grows in town or does container gardening. But I have learned it doesn't matter how much space you have, you will always want more, and you never have enough. So I have my husband add on to my garden pretty much every single year. He's probably sick of me by now, but luckily he sticks around. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today as I did this companion planting in my garden, and I hope that I gave you some helpful tips and that you're able to put these ideas into use in your own garden. Spring is here. Happy planting. Until next time, God bless.